Because my video series and interactions with apologist William Lane Craig totals to almost 2 hours worth of content, I wanted to cover some of the best objections to the moral argument for God's existence in their own smaller, easier to digest videos. To sum things up, here's the standard moral argument for God's existence. Premise 1. If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. Premise 2. Objective moral values and duties exist. Conclusion, therefore God exists. This objection is going to cover problems with the kind of objectivity theistic ethics provides as it relates to moral values. I intend to show that theistic ethics isn't quite as objective as apologists claim it is, and once they try to fix the objectivity problem that I'm going to point out, they lay the groundwork that can then be used to allow for a similarly objective moral value system that is compatible with atheism. Now, in order for the moral argument to work, an apologist must assume a theory of ethics known as modified divine command theory. In philosophy, this is what is called a metaethical theory. That is, a theory that attempts to explain what makes something morally valuable and what constitutes our moral obligations. Modified divine command theory says that objective moral values are equivalent to God's nature, and that objective moral duties, that is, what we ought to do, morally speaking, are made up of God's divine commands to us. But what do apologists mean when they say something is objectively good? According to famous Christian apologist William Lane Craig, something is objective only if it is mind-independent. Here he is in his own words.
What one means by objective here is mind-independent, that they're not subjective.
So on their view, something like love is good only if it is a property of God's nature. And it's objectively good because it's mind-independent. Hey, wait a second. Don't Christians conceive of God as being a disembodied mind? You know, I could have sworn I heard William Lane Craig say something about this.
And therefore it follows logically that the transcendent cause of the universe is an unembodied mind. And thus we're brought not merely to an uncaused cause of the universe, but to its personal creator.
Wow. So, how can Craig say that God's nature is somehow mind-independent when he holds that God is an unembodied mind? How can the nature of a mind be mind-independent? After all, being a mind is a necessary condition in order for something to be loving or truthful or whatever other properties Craig wants to stuff into God's nature. Now, while it seems like a contradiction in the theistic worldview, I can think of one way to harmonize this problem. One could say that if a God exists as apologists conceive of him, then it would be a mind-independent fact that its nature was loving, assuming that it was loving. This kind of objectivity is purely descriptive in nature, and if apologists want to use that kind of objectivity to serve as their foundation for their metaethical theory, then it's actually pretty easy for an atheist to achieve the same thing using that standard. One possible method of objectivity in this way would be universal human desires. After all, even on atheism, humans have a nature as dictated to us by the brute facts of our biology. All of these facts would be mind-independent, in the same way that apologists would say that God's nature would be. This view is defended by philosopher Larry Arnhart in his book, Darwinian Natural Right, The Biological Ethics of Human Nature. There are other possible formulations of atheist-compatible metaethical theories that can be given here. Another explanatory ultimate for atheistic metaethics is to say that something is good if it provides for the well-being or flourishing of conscious creatures. After all, there are some mind-independent facts about those in at least some cases. There are lots of different ways that we can take this, but that's beyond the scope of this video. I do encourage viewers to investigate the wealth of metaethical views that are out there, where the vast majority of them are completely compatible with atheism. There is one other objection that I want to cover here, as it relates to the objective nature of moral duties. Mind independence isn't the only kind of objectivity that seems to be relevant when discussing things like moral duties, or what we ought to do, morally speaking, in any given situation. The basis apologists use to justify premise 2 of the moral argument, the idea that objective moral values and duties exist at all, is to appeal to our deeply held moral intuitions. Deep down, we feel as if moral judgments are objective. But when it comes to moral duties, our moral intuitions tell us that for a duty to be objective, it should apply to all beings that are capable of acting morally. The problem for modified divine command theory is that it doesn't provide this kind of objectivity at all. In fact, it's tailor-made so that God gets a get-out-of-jail-free card for not fulfilling the moral obligations we'd hold even other lowly humans to. This is the impetus behind atheistic critiques of theism, like this one by the host of the Atheist Experience TV show, Tracy Harris. She says, "You either have a God who sends child rapists to rape children, or you have a God who simply watches and says, 'When you're done, I'm going to punish you.' If I could stop a person from raping a child, I would. That's the difference between me and your God." Modified divine command theory exempts God from having any moral duties at all, because he does not issue commands to himself. You can see Christians like William Lane Craig bring this point up when they engage in genocide apologetics to justify God commanding the genocide in 1 Samuel 15, 1-3. Quote, "According to the version of divine command ethics which I've defended, our moral duties are constituted by the commands of a holy and loving God. Since God doesn't issue commands to himself, he has no moral duties to fulfill. He is certainly not subject to the same moral obligations and prohibitions that we are. For example, I have no right to take an innocent life. For me to do so would be murder. But God has no such prohibition. He can give and take life as he chooses." Now compare this with other metaethical theories, and nearly all of them are compatible with atheism, where we do get an objective system of moral duties that would apply equally to all beings capable of acting morally, even God, if he existed. The conclusion to take away from this video is that theistic metaethics don't necessarily provide the kind of objectivity that apologists say it does. Furthermore, once those theories are examined to see how they could be seen to provide that kind of objectivity, it's in a way that's easily achievable by atheist-compatible metaethical theories.